Chargers Broncos, next game I want to get to. The Chargers win this game 23-16. Divisional battle between these two teams. Talk about the Chargers' top 5 graded players. You brought up Khalil Mack's name earlier in the show. The ageless wonder still at the very top of this list. He had a 90.5 overall grade in this one. Offensive tackle Rashawn Slater back in the lineup, 82.0. Safety Elijah Molden with a 76.1. Wide receiver Quentin Johnson, a 74.8. And then offensive guard Zion Johnson with a 71.2. Justin Herbert, 62.9 in this game. Flipping on over to the defensive side, to the Denver side of things, safety Levi Wallace with a 92.0. Defensive tackle Malcolm Roach with an 87.1. Cortland Sutton, their go-to wide receiver in all situations, it feels like. 85.3. Offensive tackle Mac Peart with an 81.7. And then Jonathan Cooper with an 81.6. Bo Nix in this one. It started off rough for the kid, but it ended pretty strong. He ends up with a 78.7 overall grade in this one, thanks to a red-hot fourth quarter from Nix to actually make this a game in the end. What'd you think about this one? What's the stat that mattered here?
It's those first 3 quarters. It's that rough start that we have to highlight because that's really what lost them the game, right? And you talk about the first 3 quarters of this game. They only ran 30 plays, which is not great for 3 quarters, and they only got 63 total yards out of it. 5 first downs in the first 3 quarters, 58.3 offensive grade. You had the Cardinals earlier as like the game you thought would go better. Mm-hmm. That was me this game with Denver. I actually really thought Denver was going to come in and their defense was playing great and they would win this game and they were starting to get it rolling. And for 3 quarters, they had nothing. It didn't help that Patrick Surtain got hurt at the very beginning. He's out with a concussion, or we'll see how long he's out. But this offensively, it just melted down for Denver for the first 3 quarters. Only 3 plays of 10-plus yards, all of them runs, 2 of them Bo Nix scrambles. They just kind of same as the Cardinals. Offensively, it was just not there. I know they found a little bit of juice late and made it look like a 1-score game, but this game was a lot more dominant by the Chargers than the final score would tell you because the Broncos in the first 3 quarters just could not move the ball.
Yeah, and I think that my stat that told the story here for the Broncos and sort of what goes into that is they're putting a lot on Bo Nix's plate. I think a lot of people obviously it was very easy to go after Bo Nix for the first half of what he was playing because it was like he had like 2.2 yards per pass. I mean, it was a terrible average through those first 3 quarters. But this has to be a constant. Like they want to run the ball better.
Well, look at the other 2 rookies, right? Look at Caleb and look at Jaden. And why do we keep saying their offenses look so good? Not just because they've been good, but there is balance and there's other good things going on other than just the quarterback's playing great. This team doesn't have that.
And I mean, obviously, like the team's not rushing the football great. I see that both of us have the same most disappointing, so we can just talk about it here. Javonte Williams in this game, 41.9 rushing grade. 54.3 rushing grade just overall this season, so it's not that much better for the entire year. His yards after carry is still below 3. I mean, like, Javonte's just not the same player. Obviously, he's coming through a major injury that he's recovering from since he got into the pros, but he's not the same player that we saw at UNC. He has not been since he really became a full-time starter, especially after that injury in the NFL. And I think that that's really hurting them because they're forced to now put more on Bo Nix than you would want. Like when you draft Bo Nix and you see him at Oregon, sure, you could think that he could be more at the NFL level, but you wouldn't say that about the first 6 weeks. You wouldn't want the ball to be in his hands at all times in the first 6 weeks. You would have wanted a really good run game, a good offensive line, which the Broncos, most expensive offensive line in the NFL. They've got a stable of running backs that you would think that you would at least make it serviceable, middle of the pack in the NFL, and it's not. So now, it's understandable that you look at Bo Nix's statistics and some of his efficiency metrics and his grades and everything like that, and it's understandable why it's lower. Because there's more on his plate than there should be. And I think that's because, again, now going into the stat that told the story, it's the Broncos' rush game. 11 rushing attempts in this game from running backs. That was the lowest mark in the NFL in Week 6. Just 11 total attempts. Now, Bo Nix was able to do stuff with his legs, but if you take the Bo Nix stuff away, 11 total attempts from your running backs? This game's not that out of hand. You're playing the Chargers. It's not like they got a potent offense and they're lighting the world on fire. Run the damn ball. So, like, to me, it's just that's an issue. And then 110 attempts from running backs this season, just total. That's 25th in the NFL. Well, you got to be able to run the ball better. Sean Payton. I like Bo Nix, too. I had him decently high on my big board. I like Bo Nix when he was at Oregon. I think he could be a decent pro and a good starting quarterback at the NFL level. You got to run the ball more. You got to have way more success. It's got to be more balanced than what it is right now. There is too much asked of Bo Nix, in my opinion. And to me, that's the stat that tells the story. Because with that being the case, you are so far behind the 8 ball when you get to that really good fourth quarter from Nix. Nix, I don't think it's just going to be this quarterback that comes out of the gate in the first and second quarter and lights the world on fire. If anything, it's going to be Sean Payton getting with him at halftime and saying, okay, this is what the team is doing. Here's how we adjust. And I think Nix's experience, he could go, okay, all right, I can do this. And they have a good second half strategy, especially like we saw getting down to the fourth quarter. But to me, they are not running the ball nearly well enough in order to have success, consistent success, I should say, offensively for this team.
And I was looking at this up front. You mentioned that offensive line, and I know they lost Lloyd Cushenberry in the offseason, but last year they were 4th in the NFL in run blocking grade, and this year they're 26th. I mean, they need to block people too. I mean, Javonte Williams can be a good player, and they've got what, Jaleel McLaughlin and these other backs, but you got to be able to block people. None of those guys are Derrick Henry or Christian McCaffrey, right? You have to be able to block people up front. If you've got the most expensive offensive line in football, you would think they're not going to be the 7th worst run blocking team in the league. So that's to me, I look at that and I go, okay, they have to block people. Their offensive line has to be better than that.
Right, and I think that's where it's people in the chat are saying, like, hey, the Chargers did a really great job. There wasn't really anywhere to run the ball, and that's sort of my most impressive here in this game. It's just the Chargers brand of football overall. Their defense and just an offense that does enough behind a really good defense. They're number 1 in the NFL in points allowed per game at 13.2. They're 2nd overall in EPA per play allowed in how little it is. And then they're 11th overall in total defensive grade in the league. This is Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter coming in and being like, yep, I mean, this is just what we are going to be. We're going to be a well-coached team. We're going to have a fantastic defense. And offense, it always takes a little bit more time than defense does. But this year, I don't care who we got out there. We're going to be a good defensive team. So I don't want my Broncos rant to take anything away from what the Chargers did. And I'm giving them kudos.
And the Broncos played well for 3 weeks before that.
Right.
I mean, right? It's just sometimes you go out there and it just doesn't. Yeah.
Like you said, they've got to. You have to block people better.
Yeah.
You have to be able to run the ball better. So kudos to the Chargers, obviously, and their brand of football, which is working this season. But for the Broncos, you got to run the ball better. Most impressive before we move on.
You went the defensive route, and actually I want to credit Jesse Minter real quick for kind of taking over for a few minutes there as the interim head coach when Jim Harbaugh had his health scare. Thankful he's okay, obviously. But I'm going to go the offensive side, too, with Greg Roman. I try to find a way to pick like one coach or one coordinator a week. For me, it's going to be Greg Roman this week. I thought he came out with a really good plan. Look, they were not afraid of this Broncos defense. They came out in their usual stuff, 2 and sometimes 3 tight ends or a fullback, big Scott Matlock at fullback, and they're running the ball downhill on Denver. And the one thing that he took advantage of, okay, Denver's one of the highest man coverage rate teams in the league. Look at how the secondary's been playing, right? You have Surtain, you have Riley Moss, you got good players, but Surtain got hurt early in this game, and in the first half especially, Denver was staying in that man coverage, and Greg Roman came in with a really good plan to beat it. Now, Justin Herbert in the game, 7 of 12 for 98 yards and a touchdown against man coverage, and in the first half was really the big chunk of that. 5 for 6, 75 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 big-time throw, and 82 passing grade against man coverage. There were just the way that Greg Roman was controlling this defense, right? They got the big touchdown. That was against man coverage. Then, the Broncos responded by going zone for a bit, and he was running on it and throwing screens and getting after the catch against it. Then they'd go back to man, and he'd have something else for the man coverage. Greg Roman really called a great game here, at least, especially in the first half. I know they didn't score but 3 points in the second half. I think it was 20-0 at one point. Mm-hmm. I know it slowed down as the game went on because the Chargers aren't generally that explosive, but I thought against this team and the way the Broncos run their defense, especially when Surtain got hurt, and the Broncos, at least for the first half, kept staying in that man coverage, figuring, okay, we can't change the whole game plan just because he got hurt, which I get it, but that's also Patrick Surtain. I mean, that he kind of changed his game plans. I thought Greg Roman did a really nice job early in this game of having a plan for a defense that, honestly, over the last 3 weeks was the best defense in the NFL.
I think it's a good shout-out.